So I want to share some tips with you that I think could help shore up some of the technique related things, so hopefully you could open your eyes a little bit to those. I also have a bunch of sound clips, like 15 minutes worth or more of, hey, this way I think is better than this way, or this way could be better than this way. Just think about that. But I want to get one thing out there before we start that, is be dogmatic about your faith. Be dogmatic about the fact that Christ is King, Jesus is Lord, that he is ruling and reigning this very day over all the universe. That those who place their faith in him are forgiven of all of their sins, and they are reborn, they are made new to be an adopted child of God who will spend an eternity worshiping him. Be dogmatic about that. Do not be dogmatic about tone, because although it's helpful to know the principles, to know the things that can help us in regards to our tone, there's not just one way. In today's world, we can buy all the right gear, we can build or even buy the right presets. Social media has completely removed the mystery, so you can look at anyone's Instagram who is good at this thing and see exactly what they're using. And so those things in culmination should really remove the mystery, right? It should take all the guesswork out of getting this tone thing right. But time and time again, in the consults that I've done over the years and just talking to people are falling short of their goals as it relates to tone. So I want to explore why that might be today. And also would like to touch on why any of this matters in the first place. So there's a noble pursuit behind this. So if you're a guitar player who is dedicating the talent that you've been given to the Lord, and you're using that talent to serve him and to serve his people on Sunday mornings, as we gather to sing to him and to sing about him, we really have an end goal that is forgetting about our tone. We want to get it locked in, so when that time comes, when we've gathered with the saints to worship God, that we no longer think about the tone. So getting it locked in is pretty important for us. When your tone is locked in, you're free to worship rather than focusing on something that doesn't sound quite right. You can shift your focus from what it is we're doing, so tone, playing guitar, to what it is that we're taking part in. We're leading people in the worship of Christ the King, and we are worshiping him ourselves. In that moment, we should be worshiping as well. So that's why it's important that we get this stuff locked in so those things can happen. So I've given hundreds of consultations over the years, and most of them don't happen because people are happy with their tone. They're coming to me because they're frustrated with their tone and they're looking for some direction. And we know that gear is a big part of the equation. So let's just say that gear is 50% of the equation. I think some people think it's 80 or 90% of the equation, and that's a lot of what I want to focus on today. But let's say it's at least 50% of the equation. A lot of the brothers and sisters that I consult with, they are overlooking the other half of the equation that contributes to tone, which is technique. The key point that sets up this whole video is tone is not just about the gear we use, it's also about how we play. And they come together to ultimately create the sound that we're after or create the sound that we're unhappy with. And guitar gear often gets the spotlight. It's the thing that people chase after. And some of it can be due to curiosity. Of course, again, I take part in this too. I want to try different stuff and see how it sounds and maybe see if it gives me those extra tone inches that I've been looking for. But some folks, I guess, again, after years of doing this, either purposefully overlook the fact that their technique is deficient and maybe contributing to their tone woes, or they truly don't know that the techniques we use, how we play, where we play, the way we hold our pick, how hard we pick the guitar, those things have a massive influence on our tone. And some people simply don't know that. So I do want to put a focus on both gear and technique today. If you're the person who maybe you have all the gear that you need, but you're uncomfortable acknowledging that your technique is really what needs work, and you know that that would be the thing that gets you over the hump in regards to your tone, or maybe you're the person who has no idea that these techniques make such a big difference in your tone journey. So I want to speak to both of you guys today, but with a particular emphasis on the technique part. First, we'll talk about gear. Gear is definitely the first place that most people go when they're not happy with their tone, and rightly so. Let's be honest, gear obviously is a massive part. Without the right gear, we're going to struggle. And I want to talk about some particular aspects of our gear that we should be focusing the majority of our attention on. So the first thing we'll talk about is pickups. In my experience, the pickups in the guitar make so much more of a difference than the guitar itself. You know, an average guitar in terms of fit and finish and fretwork and playability and stuff will be better with the right pickups than an amazing guitar with everything better than the average guitar except pickups. If you don't have the right pickups, you're going to really struggle with getting the right tone. Same guitar even can go from bright and chimey and lively to very dull and really lacking in a lot of areas simply due to the pickups. To take this further, we have to be mindful about balancing output, clarity, and compression. Those things come together to make the tone, you know? So if you have guitar pickups that are too low output, for example, they're not going to push your pedals like your pedals should be pushed, because there's certainly an argument to be made that a good, healthy amount of input signal into an overdrive pedal makes it sound really nice. If you're pushing it with a very weak signal, it's not going to sound the same. It's not going to sound as full. You're not going to get the same breakup. And then push that further downstream with your whatever you're using for an amp, right? You got to push it kind of hard. And that's where a lot of that tone comes from. But if you swing that pendulum to the other side and your pickups have too much output, too much compression, not enough clarity, they're going to push everything too hard. And then the result is the opposite, right? You get no articulation. Your wet effects are being pushed way too hard, which is like, you know, trying to push a basketball through a garden hose. There's just not enough room because the signal is being just crammed through everything, is the way that I think about it. And then your overdrive pedals going to have a hard time gain staging. You're not going to have a lot of headroom. So that's that give and take between, you know, low output pickups and high output pickups. So not to belabor the point, but getting this right is very important. So if you prefer the sound of single coils, for example, you have to know what you're giving up. You're going to be giving up the output and the push that comes from a nice set of humbuckers that are going to push everything. And sometimes that's where the tone that you want is living. On the other side, if you prefer the higher output of humbuckers and you choose a set of humbuckers that's going to be very high output, you are going to lose some of that clarity that you probably hope to have. I like to think about pickups on a continuum of, you know, low output, high clarity, and low compression to high output, not very much articulation or clarity, and high compression. And I like to live like right in the middle. Balance is usually a good thing. So I like to live like right in the middle. And admittedly, I used to prefer very low output pickups, and I certainly think there's a time and a place for those. But as the amp simulators have gotten better, which we'll talk about next, it's been really nice to grab maybe a set of higher output pickups because the amp simulator can take it. It can take the extra input gain, and there's some really good tone that can be had by doing that too. So to talk about amp sims for a second, they've gotten just miles better at behaving like real amplifiers. The Kempers I was using back in the day, loved them at that point in time. They were the best thing that I could get my hands on, but they were very compressed at the input, and it made using higher output pickups kind of tough. But now, the HX Stomp, the UA, Ruby, and Dream, and the Tonex obviously is like the cream of the crop right now. They're kind of leading the pack. They behave at the input a lot more like real amplifiers do, so you can push them harder with your pickups and your pedals, and you get that tone that's like, it's just dreamy, man. It's got all the artifacting and all the energy and stuff that you love. So we also have to consider that maybe if we did like lower output pickups at one time because of the amp sim that we were using, it might be time to try a higher output set of pickups. You know, so for example, Lambertone's Cremas, awesome pickups, low output. Maybe ratchet that up to a Lambertone grinder in the bridge, or try a set of Lambertone's Red Eyes to go a little further and see, you might be finding that tone that you're missing just by increasing the output of your pickups a little bit. But you got to make sure that you get higher output pickups that have tremendous clarity. Lambertone's obviously has that nailed at this point in time. Even like Veritas Popes I found have been awesome for that too. So now let's talk about pedals. So the truth is, even high quality pedals that you've spent a lot of money on, pedals that maybe you have a particular attachment to, they can also fall short. And it's not the pedal's fault. Most of the time it's ours, right? We're trying to make the pedal do something that it's incapable of doing. So for example, I remember, gosh, this was years ago. My daughter's 10 years old now. And the time that I had off after her birth was the time that I actually bought the Strymon Big Sky. So lots of great memories there. Obviously, my daughter's birth, way more important of a memory than the Big Sky. But the Big Sky has been a really important part of my playing for a decade or more at this point, you know? So here's what happened. I bought the Blue Sky. So I went down to a guitar shop that has boutique pedals like an hour from me, and I bought the Blue Sky. Once I heard that there was a reverb pedal out there that could give me the tone that I heard. So I tried the Blue Sky, and it was great. It wasn't quite what I had heard, you know, what I had hoped, but it was awesome. So I thought, if the Blue Sky is this good, I wonder how good the Big Sky is. So I went and got the Big Sky, and boom, like within 20 or 30 minutes, I had the tone that I was looking for. It did not take very long to get it. So that was a very prime example of like two great pedals. Can't argue that. The Blue Sky is legendary, as is the Big Sky. The Blue Sky has its applications, and so does the Big Sky. And the Big Sky for my application was what I needed, and I would not be where I am today in terms of my like being pleased with my tone had I not transitioned to the Big Sky and found that out for myself. Another example would be compressors. So I used to love the Diamond compressor. And that yellow box was one of my favorites. And it's because I played single coil guitars. I liked single coil guitars a lot back then. And then when I started transitioning to humbucker guitars, all of a sudden that compressor was not doing it for me. It did not like the hotter input. And there was no blend signal to blend the clean tone back in. So it just kind of squashed a lot, and I just did not like it anymore. But that didn't make the compressor bad. It was simply the wrong pedal for the job. So this isn't a knock on any pedals. You know, almost every pedal has like its place, right? Place and time. But it's really thinking critically about what pedals are designed to do and if that design matches the tone that we're looking for. And I know that sounds elementary, but we can't buy like a high gain distortion pedal and expect it to deliver low gain. Sometimes you get lucky and they do. You know, I'm not saying they don't, but it's unlikely. So we have to be critical sometimes about the gear that we're using. Does that gear match up with the tone that we're looking for? And the last thing that I'll talk about, this is certainly not the last thing, but the last thing that I'll talk about is mono versus stereo. The tones that you're listening to that you love, I would say the majority of the time are recorded in stereo, you know? And that's where that really big reverb and delay sound comes from. And it's almost at this point in time like a mainstay. So if you've never tried transitioning your rig from a mono rig to a stereo rig, I do encourage you to do so. That's not saying that you can't get amazing tones by plugging in and playing mono. I know a handful of players that I admire do just that. They do play stereo at times, but they also play mono and they sound amazing. So it's not like you have to, but I'm saying that if you haven't tried it, I would consider that. So it's something like a simple example is if you have a Helix and you've never just plugged into the headphone out and listened to what the effects sound like in stereo, do that because you'll be surprised at the difference. So if you haven't had a chance to try stereo out, see if you can do that. So if gear is holding you back, here's how I would prioritize kind of shoring that up. I would first go after a really good reverb pedal. Reverb is such an important part of the tone in today's worship music that it's almost like you can't get away from it, you know? So invest in a good reverb pedal. And you can start with something like a Boss RV5 or an RV6 and eventually make your way up to, you know, one of the big box pedals that maybe you hope to add one day, like a Big Sky or a Mercury X or something like that. The next thing I would prioritize is a delay pedal. And it's kind of like, duh, right? Wet effects, worship music, they kind of go hand in hand and it's unavoidable at this point. So get a good delay pedal. There's a ton out there. You'd want to prioritize one that has at least tap tempo, I would say. But let's get a good delay pedal. Next, and sorry, the reason why I would say that, like over getting a good overdrive pedal first, is because you can play with a clean tone with really good wet effects and still contribute, you know, in a positive way to the style of music that we're all playing now. The other side of the coin would be if you just bought an overdrive pedal to start with, now you just have this overdriven guitar tone that's just dry and that's not really going to fit well with the songs that we're playing. So that's why I say that. So reverb, delay, and then get a nice medium gain overdrive pedal. So I would specifically say medium gain because you'll set it for the tone that would be your biggest tone that you would ever play with during a set. And then it'll teach you how to use your picking dynamics in your guitar volume to get less gain. So you can turn a medium gain pedal into a light gain pedal simply by playing softer and having really, really good picking dynamics. So it'd be a good lesson at the same time as being functional. And now you have your good overdrive pedal. Then you want to go pickups. So guitar pickups are critical. So if you have a guitar that you love, put better pickups in it. If you are upgrading your guitar, I would say buy the guitar that also allows you to afford a very nice set of pickups. And as a pro tip, right, like a Squier with amazing pickups will sound, I'll go on record saying it will sound just as good as a $4,000 bolt-on guitar, right? The pickups make a huge difference. And since we are plugging them into all these wet effects and stuff, the guitar itself doesn't make as big of a difference, in my opinion and experience, as the pickups. Now comes the second part of the video. So we've bought all the gear that we need. Some of us have spent 10 grand on a nice guitar and a pedal board with all the bells and whistles, and we're still falling short in terms of tone, still not happy with it. Why is that? I would say the vast majority of the time, it's technique. Here's where things often get overlooked, you know, whether intentional or not intentional. A lot of guitarists pour their time and their money into researching and purchasing gear, hoping that that's going to solve all of their tone problems, when really their problems reside somewhere else entirely. Because the truth is, even with the perfect setup, if your technique is not on point, you're still not going to be happy with your tone. Because tone isn't just about what you play through, it's about how you play. So I want to share some tips with you that I think can help shore up some of the technique related things, so hopefully you can open your eyes a little bit to those. I also have a bunch of sound clips, like 15 minutes worth or more of, you know, hey, this way I think is better than this way, or this way could be better than this way. Just think about that. But I want to get one thing out there before we start that, is be dogmatic about your faith. Be dogmatic about the fact that Christ is King, Jesus is Lord, that he is ruling and reigning this very day over all the universe. That those who place their faith in him are forgiven of all of their sins, and they are reborn, they are made new to be an adopted child of God who will spend an eternity worshiping him. Be dogmatic about that. Do not be dogmatic about tone, because although it's helpful to know the principles, to know the things that can help us in regards to our tone, there's not just one way. You know, I know many players who, I would say, quote unquote, violate some of the principles that I'm going to share with you and some of the techniques that I'll share with you, and their tone is arguably better than mine. They have something going on that I just don't get, right? And they've managed to make it work. These principles and techniques, I think, are, they can work for the majority, and they've certainly worked for me, which is why I wanted to share them with you. But don't be dogmatic. There's not just one way to do this tone thing. As you watch this, if you think like, yeah, man, I really could use some help with my technique, I invite you to become a member of GuitarForHisGlory.com. I have Worship Guitar Bootcamp, Worship Guitar Basic Training, how I approach tone, tone training and resources, just a bunch of videos, you know, almost 10 hours at this point of training content that could be helpful to you. So if you think that might be a good thing for you, you can head over there and check it out. The first thing that could be holding you back is your picking dynamics. So how hard or how soft you're playing the guitar. It's that simple. And it's not just strumming, so how hard do I strum or how soft do I strum, but it's even like, think about within picking patterns that you're playing. If you don't vary the intensity of your picking, the part can sound really uninteresting. And sometimes we want it to be completely flat, and that's okay. But there are times, and that's the majority of times, where you need a little bit of variation in dynamics in a picking pattern. Also, there's some amazing tone that lives on the extreme sides of the dynamic spectrum. So you play feather light and you get some beautiful tones, especially when playing ambient stuff. You play hammer hand hard and there's some awesome tones that live there too. And if you're not exploring those extreme ends, you're really missing out. The second technique is very simple, and it's all about the angle at which we strum the guitar, the angle at which we pick single strings, and whether or not we're using up or down strokes. So if I strum the guitar like this, that's going to create more drag. And the more drag we create, the more articulation and definition we have, the more like crang we're going to get, right? As I increase the angle, then it's going to be less drag and we're going to have a little bit less definition and articulation. The same thing with picking single strings. So if my pick is more parallel to the string, I'm going to have more drag, more articulation, more definition. If I angle it a little more, then I'm going to have less drag, less articulation, less definition. And then last, upstrokes I find typically result in more articulation, more definition, especially if we pick them like up and then kind of out a little bit. Whereas downstrokes, if they're done with a little bit of drag, again, less articulation, less definition. The other thing you want to focus on is actually where you are playing on the guitar. So closer to the neck, you're going to get a rounder, warmer tone than if you were to play closer to the bridge where you get a tighter, more defined tone. The third tip centers around where you're playing what you're playing. So string instruments are unique in that we can play the same part with the same octave different places on the guitar neck. That's just one of the realities, and it makes the guitar kind of cool that way. But it results in a different sound. So you have to start listening for where the part sounds best. If you know you're playing the right notes and it's not quite sounding right, then move it to a different place in the neck. You know, I tend to prefer think like Lion and the Lamb, which I have an example of later on. I tend to prefer that on the D, G, and B strings because those are thicker sound, as opposed to playing it down on the G, B, and E strings where it has a little bit thinner of a sound. There's not much meat behind the part. So you need to think about that stuff too. Where are you playing what you're playing? Final tip I have for you, at least in this video, again, I have a lot more training content over at guitarforhisglory.com that would help open your eyes to some of these technique related issues and kind of walk you through some solutions and stuff. But the final tip is you got to use the bridge pickup more. It really emphasizes the right frequencies and it's got a tighter response. And in most cases, that's what we're looking for. And the inexperienced players that I work with when I'm doing consults and stuff, many times they're just afraid of the bridge pickup. It's too ice picky for them, has way too much treble. And it's because they haven't spent the time really tuning their rig around the bridge pickup. And when you do that, you're sacrificing a little bit of the neck pickup tone that you might love, and that's okay. You're just going to have to get used to that. I'm not saying give it up entirely, but you really want to focus the tone of your rig around the bridge pickup, again, because it emphasizes the right frequencies and it gives us that nice tight response that we're looking for. Hopefully talking through this has helped you see that the journey to great tone in the worship guitar realm is a balance between gear and technique. You have to have both. There's obviously a significant gear element in the worship guitar genre. It's hard to make all the sounds that we need without all the right gear. But what's really going to bring your sound to life after you have the proper gear is your technique. So don't forget about the fact that we have to play the guitar well to sound as good as we should or as good as we hope to. So if you have the resources, yes, invest in great gear. You know, spend as much as makes sense for your family life and your church life and your devotion to the Lord and your responsibilities. But also take time, again, as much time as makes sense for your life situation to spend refining your technique, because you may find yourself buying less gear because your technique has improved to the extent that your tone is now improving as well. And if financial resources are tight, then do the best with what you have. Focus on refining your technique now, because if there comes a point, Lord willing, where you have the resources to buy the gear that you hope to have, your technique will be on point. And while you're on that journey, you'll be making the most of what you have because you know that it's your technique that is actually propping you up instead of holding you back. So wherever you are on your tone journey, I do hope that this discussion and the sound samples will be helpful to you. And I hope that it was a friendly encouragement and reminder to keep Christ at the center. He really is the reason for all of this. If you have any questions, guys, reach out to me. Otherwise, we'll get to the sound samples now. Hey there, if this video or other videos on this channel have been helpful to you, I invite you to join GuitarForHisGlory.com. In addition to over 100 song tutorials and playthroughs, there's 6+ hours of training content designed specifically for the worship guitar player to help you serve the Lord with greater confidence and skill. And really, the end goal being that we think less about playing guitar, less about tone, and more on worshiping Christ. So I hope to see you over there. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, God bless, and we'll see you in the next one.